Damon Price was 42 years old, and until that Saturday morning, he had built everything a man could be proud of. A construction company clearing $800,000 a year. A 4-bedroom colonial in Mitchellville he'd partially renovated with his own hands. 16 years with a woman he believed had chosen him before any of it existed. That morning, he came home from a hardware run and heard his wife laughing into her phone. A laugh he hadn't heard in years, saying, "He doesn't suspect anything. He's too busy playing contractor." What happened next moved fast. She slapped him. Open palm. Hard. Then she pointed at the door and screamed, "Get out!" demanding his house keys and ordering him out of a house he'd built from the ground up. So Damon reached into his pocket, and he gave them to her. What Angela didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that those keys hadn't opened a single lock in that house for 6 days. And that was only the beginning of what she didn't know. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Through the pre-dawn darkness, Damon Price's work boots crunched across the gravel of the construction site. The rising sun hadn't yet touched the skeletal framework of what would become a 3-story office building, but his crew was already assembling, thermoses of coffee in hand. They knew their boss was always first on site. "Morning, Mr. Price," called Marcus, his youngest worker, already strapping on his tool belt. Damon nodded, unrolling the blueprints on a folding table. "Let's get the northeast corner squared away before that rain hits this afternoon." His voice was quiet, but carried natural authority. The men gathered around as he pointed out the day's priorities. At 42, Damon had earned every callus on his hands. Growing up in East Baltimore, he'd watched his father work construction until his body gave out. The modest inheritance his father left behind became the foundation of everything Damon built, starting with a used Ford F-150 and a ladder he'd borrowed from a neighbor. Now, Price Built Construction employed 12 full-time workers and cleared $800,000 annually. The company logo, simple, professional, respected, appeared on trucks across 3 counties. Every contract came through word of mouth. Quality work spoke for itself. During his commute home, Damon reflected on the path that had led him here. 16 years with Angela, 8 of them married. He'd bought their colonial in Mitchellville, using the land inherited from his father, taking out a construction loan he'd personally guaranteed. The renovation became his weekend project, laying granite countertops, installing crown molding, building the back deck where they used to have coffee on Sunday mornings. Used to. The first hints of trouble had been subtle. Angela's new distance, the way she'd pull her phone closer when he entered a room, the girls' trips that seemed to multiply, her gym schedule that never quite matched the class times posted online. He caught himself gripping the steering wheel too tight, forced his hands to relax. Getting emotional wouldn't help. Observation would. Analysis would. The same skills that let him spot structural problems in buildings could reveal fault lines in his marriage. Last week, while helping with laundry, something Angela used to appreciate, he'd found the hotel receipt, not in a pocket where it might have fallen accidentally, but deliberately tucked inside the zippered lining of her gym bag. The Westin in downtown Annapolis. 3 nights, when she'd told him she was in Rehoboth with her college friends. He'd slipped his phone from his pocket, photographed the receipt without changing expression, then continued folding clothes. The cotton felt too soft in his roughened hands. He arranged everything in neat piles, just as he always did. Pulling into their driveway now, Damon noted Angela's car was already home. The house he'd built rose before him. Red brick, white trim, mature maple trees he'd planted himself. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, the sunroom he'd added last spring. From the outside, it looked exactly like the home he'd always wanted to create. Inside, the silence had weight. The kitchen light cast a harsh glow over Angela, seated at the table with her phone. Her fingers moved rapidly across the screen, her face illuminated by the blue glow. She didn't look up when he entered. Damon moved through their kitchen with practiced ease, pulling out pots and ingredients. The routine of cooking dinner, choosing spices, measuring rice, timing the chicken, gave his hands something to focus on, besides the phone that kept chiming on the table. Steam rose from the pan as he worked. The kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and herbs. He could remember when Angela would have been beside him, stealing tastes and laughing. Now she sat less than 10 feet away, completely absorbed in whatever conversation held her attention. He plated the food carefully, arranging everything just so. Set one plate in front of Angela, who murmured something that might have been thanks without looking up. Sat down across from her with his own plate. The only sounds were his fork against the ceramic and the soft tapping of her thumbs on the phone screen. Damon sat in his truck outside the house, engine off, scrolling through the photos on his phone. The hotel receipt from the Westin filled the screen. 3 nights, $742.18. A date that didn't match any Rehoboth beach trip. He'd taken that first photo 38 days ago. It wasn't the last. His thumb moved methodically through his photo gallery. Screen captures of their shared cell phone bill, showing a number he didn't recognize, appearing again and again, always during her gym time. Times, dates, durations, all documented with the same attention he gave to building specs. 2 bank statements showing cash withdrawals, $2,500 on the 3rd, $1,700 on the 17th. Their joint savings account, which he used for payroll and materials. Angela had never touched it before last month. Then there were the notification screenshots from when she'd left her phone on the counter. Messages from someone named Brett, popping up 4 times in 20 minutes. The next day, she'd changed her lock screen settings. No more preview notifications. He lowered the phone, studying their house through the windshield. The maple trees he'd planted cast afternoon shadows across the brick facade. Inside, Angela's car in the driveway told him she was home early too. A burst pipe at the Miller site had sent his crew home. Water damage couldn't wait, but the repair team needed space to work. The house felt different now, like a blueprint where the measurements didn't quite add up. Every detail he'd crafted, the custom trim work, the hand-laid tile in the master bath, the backyard pergola he'd built last summer, all of it weathering a storm he couldn't see but could feel building. He hadn't confronted her. Accusations without evidence were just words, and Damon Price had learned early that words without substance couldn't build anything that lasted. He needed foundation. He needed proof. The front door opened silently with his key. The foyer was quiet, sunlight slanting through the windows he'd upgraded 2 years ago. Angela's purse sat on the entry table, her keys tossed beside it. Probably napping upstairs. She'd been taking afternoon naps lately. Something new. His home office door stood slightly ajar. He needed the Miller contract to document the pipe burst and reschedule the completion timeline. The leather chair creaked softly as he settled behind his desk, reaching for the drawer where he kept active project files. It was already open. Just slightly. Not how he left it. A manila folder lay on top of his contract files. Heavy paper stock, crisp edges, not his. His hands, calloused from 20 years of building work, lifted it carefully. The letterhead appeared first. Law Offices of Gwendolyn Marsh, Family Law and Divorce Mediation. The title read, Preliminary Asset Assessment and Division Strategy. Angela's handwriting covered the margins in blue ink. The house address was circled twice. Next to price-built construction, she had written, argue co-investment based on shared accounts, and check incorporation date versus marriage date. A post-it note marked timeline stuck out from the edge. Her neat script laid out the next 6 weeks. File initial papers. Request temporary occupancy. Change locks? Damon sat very still. The kind of stillness he'd learned from reading structural problems, the moment before deciding if a wall could bear weight or would crumble under pressure. His phone came up slowly, deliberately. Each page made a soft shutter sound as he photographed it. The documentation was methodical. Every page, every note, every post-it. The same careful attention he gave to photographing completed project stages for clients. Evidence of work completed. Evidence of damage done. The folder went back exactly as he found it, aligned with the edge of the drawer. He closed it with the same quiet he used approaching unstable structures. The chair slid back without a sound. Through the window, he could see Angela's car hadn't moved. The house remained silent. His feet carried him to his truck with the same measured pace he used on scaffolding. Each step placed with purpose. Balance maintained. The truck door closed with a soft click. His phone was already in his hand. Uncle Wendell's number appearing under his thumb. His father's brother. The retired attorney who'd watched him build everything from nothing. It rang twice. "Damon, I need you." 3 words, carrying the weight of 16 years. He pulled away from the curb as Angela appeared in the doorway, stretching like she'd just woken up. She didn't see him. She never knew he was there. His evidence was secure in his phone now. Every betrayal documented with the same precision he used to document every house he'd ever built. The foundation was laid. Now he could begin to build something else. Consequences. 4 days passed like water under scaffolding. On Saturday morning, Damon's truck rolled into the driveway just after 7, the bed loaded with supplies from Miller's Hardware. The autumn air bit cold through his work jacket as he gathered his purchase. Replacement hinges for the master bathroom cabinet. A task he'd promised to handle weeks ago. Promises still mattered to him. Even now. The side door opened silently. He'd oiled those hinges himself last spring. Angela's voice carried from the kitchen, bright and alive in a way he hadn't heard in months. He paused in the mudroom, hardware store bag hanging forgotten from his fingers. No, he has no idea. Angela's laugh sparkled like broken glass. He's too busy playing contractor to notice anything. I swear, Brett, sometimes I think he loves his tools more than... The keys landed on the granite countertop with a gentle click. Angela spun around, phone still pressed to her ear, her face cycling through expressions like channels changing, surprise, fear, anger, defense. The call died mid-word. For a long moment, they stood in the kitchen they'd remodeled together 3 years ago. Damon remembered laying that granite himself, Angela bringing him coffee, talking about the future they'd build here. Now she stared at him like he was an intruder in his own home. "How long have you been standing there?" Her voice pitched high, defensive. "Long enough?" His voice came out steady, the same tone he used explaining structural problems to clients. "You were spying on me?" Color rose in her cheeks. "This is exactly why I can't. This controlling behavior, this constant... Controlling?" The word sat between them like a misplaced beam. "Is that what you told Gwendolyn Marsh?" Angela's face went still. "What are you talking about?" "Your divorce attorney. The one whose preliminary asset assessment you've been hiding in my desk drawer for the past 14 months. The silence stretched taut as a level line. "You went through my private, my drawer, my office, my house." Each word laid down like foundation stone. "The house you've been planning to take while I was playing contractor." "Your house?" Angela's voice rose sharply. "I've lived here just as long as you have. I've invested just as much. The only thing you've invested," Damon said quietly, "is time planning how to take what I built." "What you built?" She stepped toward him, hands clenched. "While you were out building, who kept this house running? Who managed our life while you were playing with your little construction company? The company that pays for everything you're standing on." His calm seemed to infuriate her more. "The company whose financials Brett's been accessing illegally." Angela's palm cracked across his face, the sound sharp as splitting wood. Damon didn't move, didn't raise his hand, didn't raise his voice, just looked at her with eyes that had seen through every wall she'd tried to build between them. "Get out!" Her voice shook. "Give me your keys and get out of my house." Damon reached into his pocket. The key ring landed beside the first set. 3 keys, polished with use. He looked at her once more, seeing not the woman who'd shared his bed for 8 years, but the stranger who'd been dismantling his life from within. He walked out without another word. Angela's laughter filled the kitchen seconds later. "Brett? Brett, you won't believe what just happened. He just walked out, handed over the keys, and left without a fight. God, he's so predictable." Her victory tour began at the front door. The key slid in smoothly, but wouldn't turn. She tried again. Nothing. The second key. The third. None worked. The back door yielded the same result. The side entrance, with its heavy deadbolt, the one Damon had installed himself last winter, rejected every key. Standing in her own kitchen, Angela stared at the useless metal in her hand. Her phone came up, Damon's number appearing under trembling fingers. Voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. The third call connected. Silence answered her. "The keys don't work," she said, hating the tremor in her voice. "I know." His voice came through clear and calm. "What do you mean, you know? Damon, what did you—" "I had the locks rekeyed 6 days ago. All 4 entry points. The locksmith came on a Tuesday while you were at the gym." "The gym? Where she'd been meeting Brett. That's my house, too." "It's in an LLC," he said simply. "Talk to your attorney. She'll explain it." The line went dead. Angela sank into a kitchen chair, the key ring cold and useless in her palm. The house she'd planned to claim stood around her like a cage. Every lock changed, every assumption reversed. The man she'd dismissed as oblivious had been watching, waiting, building a case while she thought she was building an escape. Meanwhile, Damon merged onto the highway, the October wind threading through his cracked window. Music stayed off. Words stayed in. The road stretched ahead toward Wendell's house, each mile carrying him further from the life he'd built, and closer to the one he would build next. Wendell's brick colonial sat back from the street, sheltered by old oak trees that had seen 3 generations of Price family gatherings. Damon pulled into the circular driveway behind Jerome's truck, noting his brother's tense posture through the kitchen window. The folder of photographs felt heavy in his hands as he walked up the stone path. Inside, Wendell's kitchen table had transformed into a legal war room. Documents spread across the oak surface like battle plans, stack after stack of papers bearing official seals and signatures. The retired attorney sat in his usual chair, reading glasses perched on his nose, while Jerome paced near the coffee maker. "Sit down," Wendell said without looking up. "Both of you." Damon took the chair across from his uncle. Jerome reluctantly claimed the seat between them, his fingers drumming against his thigh. "First," Wendell began, removing his glasses, "tell me exactly what happened this morning." Damon recounted the scene in precise detail. Angela's phone call with Brett, the argument, the slap, the keys. His voice remained steady, as if describing a routine inspection report. Jerome's jaw tightened with each word. "Good," Wendell said when Damon finished. "Now let me tell you what she doesn't know." He pulled a document from the bottom of the nearest stack. "The land purchase. You made that solo, before the marriage, using your father's inheritance money. That's documented and clear. The construction loan came later, yes, and that was joint. But 18 months ago, during what Angela believed was routine insurance paperwork," he slid another document forward. Damon recognized it immediately. The LLC restructuring they'd done during a quiet Tuesday afternoon meeting. Angela had signed without reading closely, her attention on her phone, assuming it was standard policy updates. The property's entire equity structure now sits inside a family LLC that you control, Wendell continued. She signed everything required to make it legal. Her attorney, Ms. Marsh, is working from incomplete information. Whatever Angela told her, which clearly didn't include this. Jerome leaned forward. So she can't. She can try, Wendell cut in. She has some claim on the construction loan payments made during marriage. But the property itself, the business, her position is far weaker than she thinks. Damon absorbed this silently. Then, what else? Wendell's expression shifted. 3 weeks ago, I was doing routine maintenance on the LLC documentation. Standard practice. Checking credit profiles, ensuring everything's clean. I found something. He produced a printout bearing a familiar header. Price Built Construction's Business Credit Report. Someone pulled our complete financial profile using a vendor access code. The code belongs to Callaway Regional Partners, Brett's company, Jerome growled. Angela gave him access to our private business financials. Damon's voice carried an edge for the first time. Not just access. He pulled everything. Revenue streams, vendor relationships, payment histories. The kind of deep dive you'd do if you were planning to argue for business co-investment in a divorce settlement. Wendell tapped the paper. Or if you were planning to take control of someone else's company. Jerome stood so abruptly his chair scraped the floor. Without a word, he walked out of the kitchen. They heard the back door open and close. Let him walk it off, Wendell advised. Damon stared at the credit report, seeing not just numbers, but betrayal quantified. Every private detail of what he'd built laid bare for a stranger's assessment. How long has Brett had this access? The inquiry was dated 6 weeks ago. But the code could have been in his possession much longer? Jerome returned 5 minutes later, his knuckles slightly red. Damon pointed to the chair. Sit down. And keep your hands flat on the table. His brother complied, palms pressing against the wood grain as if physically restraining himself from action. Here's what happens next, Damon began, his contractor's precision returning. He laid out each step like blueprint measurements, the counterfiling they'd prepare, the evidence they'd document, the precise timing of each revelation. Wendell nodded occasionally, adding legal context. Jerome listened, jaw clenched, hands steady on the table exactly as instructed. Evening gathered outside Wendell's windows. The kitchen lights cast their reflection against darkening glass. 3 men around a table covered in paper weapons, each document a nail in the coffin of Angela's plans. No one spoke of revenge. No one had to. The evidence spoke loudly enough on its own. The oak trees stood silent witness as Damon continued outlining their response, his voice as measured as if he were walking a client through a project timeline. This was, in its way, just another build. But instead of raising walls, they were preparing to bring some down. Monday morning dawned clear and cold as Angela wheeled her suitcase up Patricia's brick front walk. Her mother stood in the doorway, still in her robe, watching silently as Angela struggled with the heavy bag. I need to stay for a while, Mama, Angela said, forcing brightness into her voice. Patricia held the door wider. Your old room's made up. Inside, over coffee at the familiar kitchen table where Angela had done her homework 25 years ago, she began carefully constructing her narrative. He was never there, Mama. Always at work, always with the crew, always on some job site. Patricia stirred her coffee slowly. He was building a business. He was building walls, Angela countered. Emotional walls. Everything was about the company, the house, the next project. I felt invisible. Invisible in the house he built you? Patricia's voice carried a quiet edge. That he controlled, Angela amended quickly. He made all the decisions, Mama. About money, about renovations. Did you want to make those decisions? Patricia interrupted. About lumber costs and contractor bids? Angela shifted in her chair. That's not the point. What is the point, Angela? The point is, I was unhappy. I am unhappy. She pulled her phone out, checking it reflexively. No messages from Brett since yesterday. I deserve more than being some contractor's wife who sits home alone while he works 80-hour weeks. Patricia set her spoon down carefully. Some contractor, she repeated softly. The same contractor who helped Timothy with his college applications last year? Who fixed my roof after that storm? Who never missed a Sunday dinner unless he was physically out of state? Angela's phone buzzed. Her attorney's office. I need to take this, she said, standing quickly. In the privacy of her old bedroom, Angela listened as Gwendolyn Marsh's calm professional tone grew increasingly strained. There's been a development, the attorney said. We received a counterfiling from Harold Osie's office. He's representing your husband. Who's Harold Osie? One of the top family law litigators in the district. And Angela. The house is in an LLC, a family limited liability company that predates your divorce planning by over a year. You signed the documentation yourself. Angela sank onto her childhood bed. What documentation? Multiple forms, dated 18 months ago. Your signature is clear on all of them. Marsh paused. Why didn't you tell me about this LLC structure when we did our initial assessment? I didn't. I don't remember signing anything like that. Well, you did, and it significantly impacts our position regarding the property. Another pause. We need to meet. Today, if possible. There are other concerns we need to discuss. Across town, Damon stood on his latest job site, reviewing foundation plans with his foreman as if nothing had changed. His crew worked around him with the usual efficiency, no one suspecting their boss had moved into a sparsely furnished corporate apartment 3 days ago. His phone contained 17 missed calls from Angela. He had answered none of them. In his temporary office, a converted storage room with a desk and a filing cabinet, he methodically executed the next phase of Wendell's strategy. A carefully worded letter removed Angela as a signatory from the business account, copied to all relevant parties, every legal requirement checked and documented. Then he pulled up the bank records he'd been gathering. 2 cash withdrawals, $2,100 each, converted almost immediately to Venmo transfers sent directly to Brett Calloway's personal account. His phone buzzed. Angela's name appeared on the screen. This time, he answered. We should talk, she said, her voice carrying that soft note she used when she wanted something. Maybe we can work this out between us without letting the attorneys make it ugly. Damon said nothing. Are you there? Warmer now, intimate. Damon, I'm here. Can we meet? Just us? A pause. We have 16 years together. That has to mean something. He noted the precision of her math. 16 years total, not 8 years married. She was already revising history, claiming the full timeline as leverage. I'll think about it, he said finally. Really? Hope crept into her voice. I'll let you know. He ended the call. That night, in the empty corporate apartment with its generic furniture and blank walls, Damon sat at the kitchen table. The Venmo receipts lay beside his phone, but he wasn't looking at them. He didn't need to. Every number, every date, every transaction was already committed to memory. He remembered the exact moment Angela signed the LLC paperwork 18 months ago, barely glancing at it, her attention on some social media post, while Wendell quietly built a wall she didn't see coming. He remembered the bank alert showing the first cash withdrawal, how his hands had stayed steady even as his chest tightened. He remembered her laugh this morning on the phone, that performative warmth she thought would move him. He remembered everything, and he wrote nothing down. Patricia's kitchen glowed with morning sunlight as Damon settled into the familiar chair where he'd first sat 16 years ago. A nervous 24-year-old contractor trying to make a good impression on his girlfriend's mother. Now, at 42, he placed a leather portfolio on the worn wooden table with steady hands. Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Patricia, he said quietly. Patricia set 2 cups of coffee between them, the same way she had that first morning. You're still family to me, Damon. That hasn't changed. He nodded, his fingers resting on the portfolio's edge. What I'm about to show you, it's not to hurt Angela. It's because you deserve to know the truth. Patricia's eyes softened. I've known something wasn't right for a while now. Angela's story has too many holes. Methodically, like laying out blueprint sections for a client, Damon began presenting documents. First, the divorce asset assessment on Gwendolyn Marsh's letterhead. Angela's familiar handwriting filling the margins. Look at the date, he said gently. Patricia adjusted her reading glasses. 14 months ago? Her hand trembled slightly. But she told me this all happened suddenly. That you— There's more, Damon interrupted softly. He showed her the hotel receipt from the Westin in Annapolis, tucked inside Angela's gym bag, while she claimed to be in Rehoboth with friends. The Venmo transfers to Brett Calloway, pulled directly from the account Damon used to pay his crew's salaries. The unauthorized business credit inquiry using Brett's company access codes. Patricia sat perfectly still, her coffee growing cold and forgotten. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. How long have you known? I found the first signs 38 days ago, but I had to be certain, had to document everything. Why didn't you confront her immediately? Patricia's eyes searched his face. Why wait? Damon's response came measured and clear. Because I wanted to be sure before I blew up our lives. He paused, meeting her gaze. And because I wanted to be ready before I blew up hers. Tears began rolling down Patricia's cheeks. Silent and dignified. She didn't reach for a tissue, didn't try to hide them. What do you need from me, Damon? There will be a meeting. One specific conversation. I need you there. When? I'll let you know the exact time and place soon. He started gathering the documents. Your presence matters, Ms. Patricia. More than you know. Patricia nodded, wiping her eyes with careful fingers. Of course I'll be there. Damon closed the portfolio and stood, but Patricia's voice stopped him. Wait, there's something else you should know. He settled back into the chair as Patricia pressed her palms flat against the table. 2 years ago, Angela asked me to co-sign on a credit card. Said it was for emergencies, just in case. She took a shaky breath. Last month's statement came. $11,000 in charges. Hotels I never heard of. Expensive restaurants. Some jewelry store in Georgetown. Damon's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened slightly on the portfolio's leather edge. I didn't understand what I was looking at, Patricia continued. Not until right now. She used my good credit to— Her voice trailed off. To fund her affair, Damon finished quietly. Patricia's shoulders sagged. I'm so sorry, Damon. I should have seen it. You weren't supposed to see it. None of us were. He stood again, tucking this new information into the organized files of his mind. Thank you for telling me. At the front door, morning sunlight streaming through the glass panels, Damon turned back. Ms. Patricia? She looked up at him. This man who had become more son than son-in-law over 16 years. Thank you, he said simply. Then he walked to his truck, the weight of Patricia's credit card revelation settling into place among all the other pieces of evidence he'd gathered. Each step measured, each moment contained, moving forward with the same quiet precision that had brought him here. Harold Osie's downtown office gleamed with morning light as Damon settled into the leather chair across from his attorney's desk. The formal settlement proposal lay between them, crisp white pages filled with carefully calculated numbers. Everything structured exactly as we discussed, Harold said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of a man who had won far more difficult cases. The initial offer appears generous on the surface. Damon nodded, scanning the document, but not too generous. Just enough to make her think we're negotiating from uncertainty. Precisely. Harold leaned forward, tapping the section outlining the house valuation. We've left the LLC details vague here. If Marsh hasn't done her due diligence on the property structure, This will flush it out. How long until we hear back? Given Marsh's usual response time, 3 days. Maybe 4. Harold smiled slightly. She likes to make clients feel they're getting their money's worth by sitting on documents. Damon examined each page methodically, the way he read blueprints, looking for load-bearing points, structural weaknesses, places where pressure could be applied. The numbers were exact, deliberate. Every dollar calculated to reveal what Angela and her attorney believed they could claim. Once we have her response, Harold continued, we'll know exactly what cards Marsh is holding. More importantly, what cards she doesn't know exist. 3 days later, Angela's counter-proposal arrived through official channels. Damon sat in the same chair as Harold laid out both documents side by side. "Look at these numbers," Harold said, highlighting specific sections. "She's still working from the original asset valuation. Marsh either hasn't investigated the LLC structure or hasn't explained its implications to her client. She thinks the house is still jointly owned," Damon observed quietly. "More than that, she thinks she has leverage we don't know about." Harold shuffled through the papers. "She's positioning for a claim on the business assets, too. That unauthorized credit inquiry makes more sense now." Damon's phone buzzed. A text from Jerome. He read it twice before speaking. "My brother's contact in commercial real estate just heard something interesting," he said. "Brett's been talking to colleagues about coming into a significant personal asset situation soon." His voice remained steady, but his fingers tightened slightly on the phone. "He's describing my house, the sunroom I plan to build, the garden Angela never cared about. Like it's already his." Harold's expression hardened. "That's helpful for us, actually. Shows premeditation, conspiracy to acquire assets. Your brother's contact willing to provide a statement?" Already typed up and notarized. Jerome handled it. "Good man." Damon stood, walking to the window overlooking the busy street below. After a moment, he turned back to Harold. "I want to set up a family meeting." "At Patricia's house?" Harold raised an eyebrow. "You sure that's wise?" "Angela will agree immediately. She thinks her mother's house gives her home court advantage." Damon's voice held no emotion. "She doesn't know Patricia's seen everything." "And you want witnesses?" "I want it documented." Jerome in the driveway. "Wendell parked down the street with a phone line open to you throughout." Harold nodded slowly. "When?" "Tomorrow evening." "No point dragging this out." The attorney made a few notes. "I'll have everything ready. You make the call." Damon pulled out his phone and dialed Angela's number. She answered on the second ring. "Yes?" Her voice carried practiced caution. "I'd like to meet. Try to resolve this before it goes further." He kept his tone neutral. "Your mother's house, tomorrow at 7. Just us and Patricia." The pause was brief. Too brief. "Fine. Yes, that would be good." He hung up without further discussion. Harold was watching him carefully. "She agreed too quickly," the attorney observed. "She thinks she has time." Damon gathered his coat. "She thinks she has options." That evening, Damon sat alone in his corporate apartment, the leather portfolio open on the dining table. Every document was organized, every piece of evidence in its place. The hotel receipts, the Venmo transfers, the credit inquiry documentation, Patricia's credit card statements, 14 months of planned betrayal laid out in Angela's own handwriting. He closed the portfolio carefully. There was nothing left to prepare, nothing left to document or organize or plan. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. He set his alarm for 5 a.m., early enough for his usual pre-workday run, and went to bed. The portfolio sat on the nightstand, a quiet reminder of everything that had led to this moment, and everything that would follow. The October morning light slanted through Patricia's living room windows as Damon pulled into the driveway at exactly 7 o'clock. His dark blue work truck settled next to Angela's silver Lexus, the contrast between their vehicles a quiet reminder of their different priorities. He gathered the leather portfolio from the passenger seat, straightened his simple navy button-down shirt, and walked to the front door with measured steps. Inside, Angela had spent the previous 15 minutes attempting to solidify her narrative with Patricia. She sat at the kitchen table, leaning toward her mother with practiced sincerity. "You've seen how absent he's been, Mama," Angela pressed. "Always at work, never making time for us, for family dinners, for anything that mattered." Patricia placed 2 coffee cups on the table with deliberate care, her movements unhurried. Was all she said. "I just need you to help him understand that this isn't working," Angela continued. "That sometimes people grow apart, that it's nobody's fault." The doorbell rang. Patricia walked to answer it without responding to her daughter's carefully constructed explanation. Damon stood on the porch, portfolio tucked under his arm, his presence carrying the same quiet authority it did on his construction sites. No desperate husband slouch, no evidence of sleepless nights or emotional turmoil. Just focus, contained and precise. "Thank you for hosting, Patricia," he said, stepping inside. The 3 of them settled around the kitchen table, the same table where so many family discussions had happened over the years. Sunlight caught the edge of Damon's portfolio as he set it down, the leather worn smooth from handling. "I think," Damon said, his voice steady, "we should start with whatever you want to say, Angela." Angela straightened, sliding into the role she'd rehearsed. Her voice took on a gentle, reasonable tone. "I've been trying to tell you for so long that something isn't working between us. The emotional distance, the constant work, the way you're never really present even when you're home." She paused, carefully modulating her words. "A marriage needs partnership, Damon. It needs both people to show up, to invest in each other. I felt so alone, so overlooked." She continued for several minutes, laying out her case with practiced precision. The lonely dinners, the missed social events, the gradual erosion of intimacy. Her voice carried just the right note of restrained pain, of someone who had tried everything before reaching this difficult decision. Damon sat perfectly still, listening without interruption. His hands remained flat on the table, neither fidgeting nor clenching. He waited until she had finished completely, until her carefully crafted narrative hung in the air between them. Then, with the same methodical movement he used when reviewing blueprints, he opened the portfolio. "I'd like to address each point," he said quietly, "with documentation." One by one, he laid out the evidence. The hotel receipts, not just the one from the gym bag, but 6 others, each dated and detailed. The Venmo transfers from their joint account to Brett Calloway's personal account, timestamps clear as day. The unauthorized business credit inquiry bearing Brett's company's vendor code. "While you were feeling overlooked," Damon said, his voice level, "I was working 80-hour weeks to fund the household you were planning to dismantle. While you were missing family dinners, you were having them with someone else, on my dime, and on your mother's credit card." Angela's carefully constructed composure began to crack. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "You're trying to make this about—" she started, then stopped, as Damon placed the final document on the table. The divorce asset assessment lay between them, Angela's own handwriting clear across its pages. The date at the top read 14 months ago. Not 6 weeks, not 2 months, but over a year of documented planning. "This isn't about emotional neglect," Damon said softly. "This is about premeditation." Angela's facade crumbled completely. She turned to Patricia, reaching for her mother's support with desperate eyes. "Mama, you know how hard I tried. You know—" Patricia looked at her daughter, her face set in lines of quiet disappointment. "He showed me everything, Angela," she said, "including my credit card statements." The room fell completely silent. Not even the gentle hum of Patricia's refrigerator dared to break the weight of that moment. Angela's reaching hand fell back to the table, empty and unsupported. The weight of silence pressed against the kitchen walls as sunlight continued to stream through Patricia's windows, falling across the scattered documents on the table. Angela's hand remained frozen where it had fallen, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her with each passing second. Damon drew a steady breath, his voice carrying the same measured tone he used when explaining structural requirements to clients. "I'm not here for reconciliation," he said. "I'm not here for explanations or negotiations. I'm here to make sure you understand exactly what happens next." He touched each document on the table with precise movements, like a foreman checking off items on a punch list. "The LLC documentation has already been submitted to the court. Harold will argue that your claim on the house is significantly limited by both the premarital land purchase and the corporate structure you signed off on 18 months ago." Angela's throat worked, but no words came out. The morning light caught the tremor in her hands as she gripped the edge of the table. "The $4,200 you transferred to Brett Calloway from our joint business account?" Damon continued, his voice steady. "Harold will argue that as unauthorized marital asset dissipation. The timestamps on the Venmo transfers match perfectly with your hotel charges. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern." Patricia stood quietly and moved to the kitchen counter, her movements careful and contained as she filled the electric kettle. "But here's what you don't know yet," Damon said, laying his palm flat on the business credit inquiry document. Brett's unauthorized use of his company's vendor access code to pull Price-Built Construction's financial profile has been reported to the relevant compliance authorities. His employer was notified last week. He paused, watching recognition dawn in Angela's eyes. "He's currently on administrative leave pending their internal investigation." The kettle clicked off. Patricia's measured footsteps and the soft clink of ceramic cups provided a quiet counterpoint to the heavy silence that followed. Angela's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the blood draining from her face. "You," she started, then stopped, the word hanging incomplete in the air. "I didn't do anything," Damon corrected quietly. Brett did this to himself when he decided to use corporate resources for personal gain. The compliance investigation was automatic once the unauthorized access was reported. That's how financial systems work, something he should have known. Steam rose from the cups as Patricia prepared tea with deliberate care, her movements unhurried despite the tension filling her kitchen. Damon closed the portfolio with a soft finality. "I've arranged with Harold to cover the fraudulent charges on your mother's credit card personally," he said, glancing at Patricia. "You're innocent in all this, and I hold nothing against you." He turned back to Angela, his voice carrying the same tone he used when delivering final project assessments. "This is the last time you'll see me. Harold speaks for me going forward. There's nothing you can say that changes anything. And there's nothing I need from you except your attorney's cooperation with the process." Standing, he buttoned his jacket with steady hands. The morning light caught the simple gold band he still wore, a ring that would be removed later, privately, on his own terms. He extended his hand to Patricia. "Thank you for hosting," he said simply. Their handshake carried the weight of 16 years of family dinners, holiday gatherings, and quiet Sunday afternoons, a connection severed not by choice, but by necessity. Patricia set one cup of tea in front of Angela without comment, then took her own cup and walked to the living room, leaving her daughter alone with the scattered evidence of her choices. Minutes stretched into silence. Angela sat motionless, staring at the steam rising from her untouched tea. The sunlight had shifted slightly when Patricia finally returned, her own cup empty. She stood in the kitchen doorway, looking at her daughter with eyes that held more sadness than anger. "You did all this to a man who never did a wrong thing to you," she said quietly. "And to me, too. I want you to think about that." The words fell between them like stones in still water. Outside, Jerome leaned against his truck, arms crossed, watching the front door. When Damon emerged, he studied his brother's face with careful attention. looking for cracks in the composed exterior. Damon walked down the path with the same measured stride he'd used going in. "Let's get something to eat," he said simply. "I'm hungry." Jerome pushed off from the truck, shaking his head slowly. "You cold-blooded," he said, a note of amazed respect in his voice. Early October sunlight streamed through the wall of windows, casting long shadows across the heated tile floor of the newly finished sunroom. Damon Price stood in the quiet morning light, a steaming cup of coffee warming his hands as he surveyed his work. The Brazilian cherry baseboards gleamed against the cream walls, each miter joint perfectly matched, the kind of detail most people wouldn't notice, but that made all the difference to a builder's eye. 8 months had reshaped more than just this room. The divorce papers were filed away in his office, their clinical language recording the final tally. Angela received her car, her personal accounts, and 30% of their joint investment portfolio. The LLC structure Wendell had put in place held firm against every challenge. When Harold Ossie presented evidence of the unauthorized Venmo transfers as marital asset dissipation, the judge's ruling further reduced Angela's share of their liquid assets. She was renting a 2-bedroom apartment in Landover now. Damon knew this only because Jerome's wife had seen her at the grocery store last month. He hadn't asked for details. Some information wasn't necessary anymore. Brett Calloway's resignation letter hit his employer's desk 48 hours after the compliance investigation began. His carefully built regional network, the one he'd leveraged to access Price-Built Construction's financials, turned toxic overnight. Last Jerome heard, Brett had taken a middle management position with a small firm in Tennessee. His salary cut nearly in half. The house he'd described to colleagues as practically mine stood solid and renewed, its deed bearing only one name. Damon took another sip of coffee, remembering the weekends spent bringing this room to life. Jerome had been there every Saturday, the two of them working in the familiar rhythm they'd developed over decades. They'd laid the heated floor system together, Jerome cursing the complexity of the thermostat wiring until Damon showed him the trick to it. The custom windows, energy-efficient glass in black aluminum frames, had taken both of them to set properly. The kitchen renovation came next, quartz countertops replacing the granite Angela had chosen. Commercial-grade appliances installed with the precision Damon demanded on every job site. Custom cabinets built to the specifications he'd sketched in the margins of project plans over the years. The hardwood floors throughout the house now gleamed with a depth that only hand finishing could achieve. Price-Built Construction had grown too. The $2.4 million mixed-use development contract they'd landed in Silver Spring represented a new scale of work. 3 stories of retail topped by 24 affordable apartments. Jerome had stepped up as project manager, running the day-to-day operations with the same attention to detail that had made him Damon's right hand for 15 years. The nonprofit partnership discussions were still early, but promising. The executive director had toured their Silver Spring site last week, noting how the quality of finishes exceeded typical affordable housing standards. "This is what people deserve," Damon had told her. "Good work doesn't have to mean luxury prices." She'd nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. His phone buzzed quietly, a calendar reminder for next Sunday. Patricia would call, as she had every 3rd Sunday since the divorce was final. Their conversations were comfortable now, focused on her garden or Jerome's kids, or the church renovation project Price-Built had donated time to last month. She never mentioned Angela. Some bridges, once burned, didn't need to be discussed. Angela hadn't called once. Damon suspected she never would. The last time he'd seen her was in the final mediation session, where she'd sat silent while Harold methodically dismantled every remaining claim. The woman who'd once laughed about him playing contractor watched without comment as his profession, his precision, and his patience systematically secured everything he'd built. The morning light had shifted, warming the tile beneath his feet. Through the windows, He could see the Japanese maple he'd planted last month beginning to turn red. The tree was young, but its roots were deep. He'd made sure of that during planting. Like everything else he built, it would last. Damon lifted the coffee cup to his lips, finding it nearly empty. He thought about that Saturday morning in the kitchen when Angela had demanded his keys and told him to get out. How certain she'd been. How completely she'd misread not just the locks, but everything. His competence, his awareness, his capacity for strategic patience. He set the empty cup down on the quartz counter he'd leveled himself. The time was 6:15 a.m. He had a crew waiting at the Silver Spring site, concrete trucks scheduled for 7:00 sharp, and a $2.4 million project that wouldn't build itself. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.